Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And wherever you are in this wide, wonderful, beautiful world that we live in, you are listening to the Global Sales Leader podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper. I'm a sales relationship coach. What does that mean? In sales, it's always about that relationship, always about that rapport, always building trust and longevity. So, you're very welcome. I have another phenomenal guest here today, Patricia Fripp. She was introduced to me by a good friend of mutual friend of ours, Brian Flanagan. He pretends to be Irish, but he's actually from Texas, so he says. So don't tell him anyone. So Patricia, you're very welcome.
I'm thrilled to be with you, and I totally agree with you. We don't compete on price. We compete on relationship.
Absolutely. And a good friend of mine, Ted Rubin, always says return on relationship rather than return on investment. Because once you get the relationship right, everything else should fall into place. So a little bit about you. I've got a lovely little bit of a bio that you sent me. So thank you very much. Patricia is the Hall of Fame keynote speaker, executive speech coach. Easy for me to say, a sales presentation, online learning expert. She's been elected the first woman to become president of the National Speakers Association. Well done for that. Happy days for that. Patricia's career has delivered over 3,500 presentations, hundreds of virtual presentation, as we all have in this COVID time that we have. And you've also been on the top global 30 top global gurus from globalgurus.com and in 2019. So well done. She authors 2 books and co-authored 3 others. So that's phenomenal. And you're also a speechwriter. So a lot of accolades here, but you're going to tell more than I am, really. So Patricia, tell me the sort of, look, you're an English lady living in San Francisco. So tell me your sort of anchor points along the way to where you are now.
Well, I've had a very long and interesting life, Jason, but the highlights, I was a hairstylist in Bournemouth. And then I went to live on the island of Jersey, the Channel Isles. And I worked with 2 gentlemen from the West End of London in this very posh salon. And they could do hairstyles I'd never even seen before. And they were a lot more experienced. And one day the boss said to me, Patricia, you produce 30% more income for the salon than the gentlemen who were more talented, more experienced, and their base pay was at least 3 times more than mine, which was fair. They were more experienced. And the difference, Jason, was, and this is a lesson, whatever you do, my co-workers, my colleagues thought lunch hours were for eating lunch. I knew lunch hours were for squeezing in 3 extra customers who couldn't come any other time. If you were rich or if you were on vacation, you could come anytime, but not if you worked in the local bank or supermarket. You only had your lunchtime.
Yeah, of course.
And then it started me thinking, well, where does tenacity and the willingness to work hard really pay off? And I had the idea, the colonies. So I came to America at 20, no job, nowhere to live, didn't know anyone, knowing everyone in America was rich and the streets were paved with movie stars. And I got a job working in the Mark Hopkins Hotel in the beauty salon. And Jason, I discovered hairdressers here got paid 50% commission, no sick pay, no base pay, just commission. And to me, that was a license to steal. Yep. So I out-earned anyone I ever worked alongside. Then when I was 23, I had the opportunity to work in what was the first really fancy men's hairstyling salon when that was a new industry. And I worked for a Hollywood hairstylist, Jay Sebring. I'd pick up the phone. It would be Steve McQueen. Hey, can Jay, movie stars. Our kickoff opening party, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward came. So I knew movie stars are everywhere. Well, from the hairstyling world, I started traveling nationwide for a hair product company. And so I was speaking all around the country for hairstylists. And of course, my clients were people like you, movers and shakers in the financial district. And they started saying, well, why don't you speak to my Rotary Kiwanis Club? Can you speak at my sales meeting? I was a junkie with all my friends from the Dale Carnegie class. We'd take every training we could possibly take, every seminar. That's where I met Brian at a Dale Carnegie management course. And then I went to the National Speakers Association convention, got discovered at my first convention, was president 7 or 8 years later. And so from that point, and at that point I was, let's see, I was 32 years old when I went to NSA. And I was in my own salon traveling nationwide. And once I went to NSA, I set the goal. Let me be in a position when my lease is up at age 40 to be a professional speaker, if that's what I want to do. Because, you know, I loved the business I was in. I was doing well, but it would be, you're not going to be an old hairstylist. I'm not going to be 70 standing behind a chair. And one thing, you know, my speaking career took off. And so I sold my salon to my staff when I was 39, became president of NSA, and was mostly a keynote speaker. And then, and you know, Jason, as well as anyone, your customers and clients will tell you what they want to pay you for. And they kept saying, Patricia, can you work with our president? He's not a great speaker. And Patricia, can you help our salespeople speak the way you do? And so now my career has evolved. Most of my life, although I still do speak at conferences, most of my life is helping leaders perfect their presentations to inspire action and commitment, and work with sales teams to help them drive more business.
Awesome. Oh, what an eclectic array of background that you have. It's fascinating. And I suppose once you're in front of a customer, the message is so important. And what we are speaking about today is from the Global Sales Leader podcast. We want to make sure that our message is correct. What is the correct way of getting in front of customer and making that impact with that client so they get it and they resonate with it?
The number one secret that I work on, and it isn't really a secret, it's a principle, and that is to understand nobody gives a damn about us. They care about themselves. In other words, I don't care how good your product or service is. The prospect needs to know how our product or service makes their condition better. And ask good questions. So, for example, the average salesperson who has never been trained better says, you know, good morning, Jason. You know, I'm Patricia Fripp and I work with the Fripp Company and we've been in business for this many years and we have this unique method. Nobody gives a damn. And another key principle is if you sound the same as everybody else, you have no advantage. So I suggest if you want to be memorable, once it gets to the point where you're talking to decision makers, your first comment should be congratulations. And then you talk about what your reputation is superb. Your stock price has just gone up 2 points, and I notice your major competitor's down 3. Your latest marketing campaign is superb. Whatever it is, say something that is accurate, it's true that they're proud of. And then most salespeople say, thank you for your time. No, everybody does that. You're busy and so am I.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss if the Fripp presentation skills training is what you are looking for. So it's you're discussing, you're not trying to sell, do we have a match? And then usually by the time you get to a decision maker, if you are one of 3 companies who are being considered out of perhaps 20, you've worked with someone to prepare you for that meeting. Cool. So you then make them look like a hero to their boss. Thank you to John and Mary for their generosity in time and information. And they said that your 3 major interests, your 3 challenges, your biggest opportunities, or what you would like to discuss, based on their interest, challenges, opportunity, what they said they want to hear, that becomes the structure of your conversation.
Of course.
And then, of course, people don't remember what we say.
They remember how you feel.
Yes, absolutely. And also the pictures you create.
I love what you just said, actually, Patricia.
Yeah.
And I always think it's, it is so true. It's not about us, never about us. It's always about them. The more that you can be more empathetic and listen to understand about them. And again, what you've already suggested is you do a lot of research. Before you speak to that client, you know where they are, you know where their stocks are up or down, and you know some good positive information about them, as opposed to going, oh, hang on a minute, that's down. No, you make it about them. That's why when I introduced you, it's all about lovely positive information about you, because it's that feeling that they get, that nice warm fluffy feeling inside, which is incredible. And I'm always interested about the message, but how we can articulate it and use our language and our linguistics around it to make that impact. And I think what you've said is also that wow statement, the analogy, this story that you can build in the imagination of the other is just so important. And look, you're a presentation expert, so I can imagine your stories are pretty phenomenal to make that impact.
Well, what I do is I help, there's a formula. For example, if your prospect says this is their challenge, you might say, based on our 16 years experience, we are very used to helping companies of your size and complexity. For example, the ABC company, now you're answering their unasked question, which is, if we say yes to you, what is it going to look like? And so every sales professional needs an arsenal of good stories that match all their prospects. And if you don't have one before in a meeting, talk to all your colleagues to find out. It might not be your sale, but it's the company sale.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is what everybody laughs when I say to my sales teams, your stories have to be true. They do not have to be 100% accurate.
Yep.
Because what we do, we take what could be a 4-month process and squeeze it into a 3-minute story.
Yeah.
And the formula is situation, solution, success. So I say, Jason, company have the same challenge as you. And when John called, he said, Patricia, help. Now, of course, he didn't say help. However, if he had said help and clearly articulated his problem, which the chances are he may or may not have been able to do, and then we say, so what we did for John, which would probably be a good match to you, is now you go through the solution, your process, our 3-step methodology. And then the end is the success. If John were here, he would tell you, I would not have believed it possible that. And these are the results. So the secret is use the words in the help, the situation, and the success in the happy customer. and the solution is in your words, your methodology.
Patricia, I want to let you into a secret. I use that exactly that because it works so well. And ironically enough, I was working with a client this morning exactly on that. And I was saying, you have to match the story with the client, depending on the actual client that you're speaking with. And it doesn't necessarily have to be yours. It could be anyone else's, but make sure that you learn it. Make sure that you understand it. And it's how you phrase it back to the client. You could say one of our clients, X and Y, had this issue like yourself, and then pitch it back to them. But I think it's always about visual storytelling and saying, imagine this as an example, or using visual stories. And I think that adds so much more of an impact. I love that because we're on the same wavelength and it's always about that. I love that. So what sort of irritates you about most sales training programs that are out there on the market at the moment?
Well, usually I find companies spend a fortune helping them understand their product, the competition to compare them, their contact management system, their territory management, and they don't spend enough time, if any at all, with helping people once you finally get to these decision makers or even the first contact that's going to get you there. They don't help them with what to say. That's the first. The second, I was working with a company, and when they got a yes, it was worth $20 million over the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought in to work with the people that these were to do with retirement plans. And when this company managed it, the people I was working with, the trainers who went into companies and told people, now that your company's invested in this, this is how you manage your investments and understand and what you do. Well, the national sales manager, a couple of the sales teams heard I was there, and they sat in my training. And at the end of lunch on day 2, the national sales manager got up and said, the sales guys and I were talking, and we decided we have no idea how we managed to sell anything before we met you. And I said, now, how long does it take to get to an hour conversation? They said a year. It takes a year because of the intricacy. So you imagine how many people are working on getting the information, preparing and working all these steps. And you're going to walk in, you have 1 hour, and it could be worth $20 million. My question was, how long do you rehearse? And I expected them to say, well, the week before we go, we get everyone in the boardroom, we get a test audience, we go through, we record it to watch. Our associates ask us the toughest questions possible. They try and trip us up. We evaluate the video. We bring another team in. And by the time it's the day before, we are word perfect, we're rehearsed, we know how to pass off to each other, we know we can answer any question that they throw us. That's what I expected. And that's what I encourage my teams to do, even if it was 50,000, I'd expect.
Whatever amount,
You know what they said? If we do a run through in the back of Gillian's car before we walk in, we're lucky. And I said to them, you don't deserve the business.
Yeah, I completely concur with that. And it is practice. I would also have a video of me on Zoom. I would record a video of myself. I want to hear my voice as well, my tone, my tonality. I want to see how well I do that. And you're absolutely right. Throw the objections at you. Again and again, the most challenging questions, and also pick the other 3 competitors out there in the marketplace, what they do phenomenally well, and throw that back at them.
That's really interesting, Jason. I was working with a couple who were presenting at a meeting to get a big piece of business. And I said, you have to keep rehearsing. This is good, but you got to keep rehearsing. And they were overly cocky because the person they were going against, they said, it's a great, it's a good company, but we have a major part of our program and technology that they don't have. And this is going to win it. And I said, well, don't be overly confident. When we did the review, they said, we were in the room and the gentleman who was their major competitor, he was looking so confident and, taking a couple of notes, and he got up there. And his first message was to totally wipe out why they would need the number one asset that the other company thought they had. They said he was so good. He was so charismatic. We felt like going to work for him. And the underdog won the business. So when everything else is equal, and when you're prepared and you know how to overcome any objection you might have, the best presentation wins.
Yeah. I always think that you have to also work from the inside out, and you have to speak to yourself in the right way. I like to meditate, so I close my eyes and maybe I do affirmations, but maybe I mentally rehearse and mentally prepare before a workshop, before a presentation. I have to make sure I know my stuff inside out before I actually do anything. And I know that's a common trait from Zig Ziglar. Always said, no matter, he could have presented 1,000 times the same presentation, but he rehearsed like hell before he did the presentation because he just wanted to make sure that he's phenomenal. The question I was going to ask, and I'm thinking of, is how do you become a trusted advisor within a company that you want to collaborate and build those longevity of the relationship forever and a day, rather than being one of the 3 people that they might call up every now and again? Hey, Patricia, I might have this bit of work for you, but you have to quote for it. You might be among 3 other people. But trusted advisors, they will call you if they have a challenge. They will call you if you had an opportunity. Say, hang on, Patricia, we have this. We'd love to speak to you about this. How can we work out this together? How can you get up to that sort of level within those sales relationships? Because I think that's important.
One, every time you talk to them, you're not looking for business.
Yeah.
And and you find in your conversations ways to give them answers to problems or challenges they have, which isn't in your normal area of expertise. They might come to you for presentation skills training, but if you say well, I was working with another client that did this, and perhaps that's what you need, and it's not normally in your area. So one, it's the relationship. Don't talk to them. I have lines and information that I often send to my clients. Hey, for your Friday meeting, try this line. Or, hey, this is, I was just reviewing your speech again, and make sure you do this when you deliver it. And then don't be too anxious to take all the money on the table.
Yeah.
And if you find, I'll say, certainly I could do that for you. I used to teach customer service. That isn't where I focus now. Let me introduce you to my friend Shep Hyken, who is an expert. You know what they said? We'd rather have you do it.
That's good. Love it.
Yeah. So if you have a comfort level, your prospects would rather have you, because you know their culture, they don't have to educate you, and they're confident. Hey, we know you professionally. You'll look up your notes of what you used to do. You'll be able to do it as well as what we hire you for.
I think it's that trust, that mutual trust, but it's also the credibility and the accountability. Like, you're an expert in your field. And I think that goes around with all of the Cialdini's laws of influence and persuasion holds true every single time. Because if you're an expert in your field, they will call you, okay, even if it's just a conversation. Oh, we have this with a client. Would you give us a hand here, or whatever it might be? The question I was going to ask you, Patricia, something I always like to ask: if you were interviewing you, what sort of questions would you ask yourself, Patricia?
I know my story so well. If you were to say, well, you're an ex-hairstylist who obviously did well. You grew up at a time in England when nobody expected much of girls. What made you who you are? For that, I would have to answer perhaps 3 ways. One, I had superb parents who, through their actions, more than their words, modeled, you can't be too kind or too generous. And I saw them work hard. My parents got married in 1939, before World War II. Well, it was just when it was beginning.
Yeah.
And my father had been born with polio, so he couldn't go in the service. But I heard their stories, and it made me realize anything I experienced in my life, a pandemic, what a mere inconvenience compared to what people in England had to go through in World War II. So I'd say the good model of hard work. 2, I left home. I honestly believe if I'd stayed in England, I would never have become who I have become. You have to go 6,000 miles away from home. So you have to fend for yourself, and you create who you want to be. You are not Robert Fripp's sister. You're not Arthur Fripp's daughter. You are you.
Yeah.
And 3, and this is not a strategy, it's on reflection, because I'm sure you agree, Jason, a lot of the wisdom comes on reflection.
It does.
As a young woman, I took advantage of opportunities, because I'm a great believer opportunity does not knock once, it knocks all the time. We don't always recognize the sound.
Absolutely.
And how I did this, because of the nature of my jobs, working in very posh hairstyling salons in England, Jersey, and America, I had the opportunity to develop relationships with people I would never have met in my everyday life. Mm-hmm. That's the advantage of our job. It's the education. It's not the money. And I always ask questions. When I was a 15-year-old shampoo girl and we had these rich, glamorous women, I used to say, what were you doing when you were my age? How'd you make your money? Did you make it yourself, or did you marry it? You know, if you married it, where did you meet him? If you made it yourself, what were you doing? And behind the hairstyling chair in the San Francisco financial district, I used to say, what made you the best salesperson in your company? What did your little company do that a big company wanted to pay you millions of dollars for it? So I used making a living as an education. And often people missed my introduction in the early days of my career and said, where did you get your MBA? Or where did you get your degree in behavioral psychology? I said 24 years behind a hairstyling chair.
Yep. So
you might have to leave home. 2, if you weren't lucky enough to have good entrepreneurial, hardworking models, you might need to develop new ones. And 3, opportunities are everywhere, and they usually start with a question.
Awesome. That is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for answering that question. It always makes people think every time I pose that question, because it's always about you, but it's also about sales is about you. It's not about me. And asking some really good questions is always phenomenal, but paraphrasing it back so the other person knows that you recognize what they've said. This show is also about leadership, but it's also about giving some golden nuggets back So all the people and all the wonderful people that hear from around the globe, I thank you so much, Patricia. How can people find out more about you?
Go to Fripp, FRIPP.com, and click on free resources. Free resources. You can get special reports on improving sales presentations, teaching and training in a virtual world, and a lot more.
That's absolutely awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this. You have listened to the Global Sales Leader podcast. I'm your host. We have Patricia Fripp as my guest today, an expert, so many facets and such an eclectic array of experience. Love it. And I know the audience will love it too. Thank you so much, Patricia.
My pleasure.